Ogyanatimirandhasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Bhagavan uvacha evang prashto mahadeva swayam bhurbhuta bhavanaha dhyayamana prashna bijam nabhyapadyata karmadihi. Translation: The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Uddhava, Brahma himself, who is born directly from the body of the Lord, and who is the creator of all living entities within the material world, being the best of the demigods, seriously contemplated the question of his sons headed by Sanaka. The intelligence of Brahma, however, was affected by his own activities of creation, and thus he could not discover the essential answer to this question." Purport: Srila Jiva Goswami has quoted 3 verses from the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as follows. In the 9th chapter, verse 32, Lord Krishna blessed Brahma with realized knowledge of the Lord's actual form, qualities and activities. In the 9th chapter, verse 37, the Lord ordered Brahma to rigidly carry out the Lord's injunctions and affirmed that Brahma would thus never be bewildered in his cosmic decision-making. In the 6th chapter, verse 34, Lord Brahma assured his son Narada, "O Narada, because I have caught hold of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, with great zeal, whatever I say has never proved to have been false, nor is the progress of my mind ever deterred, nor are my senses ever degraded by temporary attachment to matter." In the present verse, in this 13th chapter of the 11th canto, Lord Krishna states that Brahma unfortunately did become bewildered by his creative functions, thus providing a grave lesson to all of the Lord's empowered representatives. Although one may be elevated to an exalted position in the Lord's transcendental service, at any moment there is danger of false pride polluting one's devotional mentality. Brahma, who is described here as Mahadeva, which is a name usually associated with Lord Shiva, can be, of course, also used or employed for describing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The great God is described as Mahadeva and Swayambhu, without material birth, born directly from the body of Garbhodakshai Vishnu. He, upon hearing the question of his sons, has become bewildered. So these names for him, Mahadev, Swayambhu, they're just to emphasize who he is. He's not just anybody. He is Brahma, who's the creator of the universe. He is conscious of everything in the universe. He created everything. Brahmanda, the universe is called Brahmanda. It means Brahma, the egg of Brahma. And he's bewildered. He's in the position of Brahma because or generally that is, one will get that position if one perfectly executes the function of a Brahmana for 100 lifetimes without any what should I say? Discrepancy, yeah, thank you. Without any discrepancy, one can take the position of Brahma. It's a post above, well above Indra. Indra's just nothing compared to Brahma. He's bewildered. He can't answer this question. What is the question? Let's see what the question is, what the difficult question is. The sage is headed by Sanak. You must have read this yesterday. See if I can answer it.
Let's see if we can answer it.
O Lord, people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects, and similarly the sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind. Therefore, how can a person who desires liberation, who desires to cross over activities of sense gratification, destroy this mutual relationship between the sense objects and the mind? Please explain this to us. Liberation means liberation from material existence, And that means that one should not have any attraction. Well, it appears that the Kumaras think that there should be practically no consciousness of what's material. What is that? Yoga, nivritti, chitta yoga, chitta nivritti. The definition of yoga is that the consciousness stops, according to Patanjali. Chitta virodha. Nirodha, sorry. Yoga chitta nirodha, to stop the activities of the mind. Well, how is that possible? Because the mind is always perceiving various sense objects. People's minds are naturally attracted. Attracted means even if one is not attracted for the sake of sense gratification, that we can't control the fact that our consciousness is always perceiving things. And even if by meditation we stop perceiving things, still consciousness continues internally. Well, there's the Mayavadi idea of liberation, is that well, that's also stated in Bhagavatam. One of the kinds of pralaya. The pralaya means destruction. So there are various kinds of pralaya. Destruction of the universe is one. At the end of Brahma's life, and then there are time to time. There is destruction. There are full destruction at the end of Brahma's day. When you say he's the creator, he's busy every day. Every day he has to create again. And at the end of his day, the universe is wound up. And there are occasional destructions up to the heavenly planets. At the time of changing a manu, which is 14 times in the day of Brahma. So Brahma is a busy fellow. It's not that he just creates and then goes on holiday to San Diego, Pacific Beach, lies on the beach. He has a lot of creating to do, again and again. So another kind of destruction is that which is going on at every moment. But the ultimate destruction is the destruction of one's material existence. And then we're no more in this material world. So the Mayavadi idea is that, what's that called? Solipsism? Where you think that, people think that what exists is just everything, whatever exists is just because I perceive it. That the mind is solipsism. Whatever exists is just it only exists because I perceive it. If I didn't perceive it, it wouldn't exist. As far as I'm concerned, it only exists because I perceive it. So the sense objects, they exist. Where do they exist? Exactly where do they exist? They exist within our mind. That's one perspective, that their perception of them is within our mind, therefore they actually exist within our mind. So the sense objects cannot be divorced from the mind, and the mind also cannot be divorced from the sense objects, because if the mind always has to have something to think about, and you can't think only in vague terms. We can think in terms that's vague concepts like peace and love, but these vague or abstract concepts, they can only be abstract concepts because there are concrete substances that interact, and that's also the base of in rasa vichar, lila. Then there are udipanas, the sound of Krishna's flute. They stimulate feeling of love for Krishna, a certain sound. So the feeling is there, but the feeling has to relate to some object. Ultimately, objects are required. So the four Kumaras asked, well, how is it possible to get liberation? Because the liberation means to stop the activities of the consciousness, so they think. And the consciousness is always concerned with that which is perceivable. So how do you do it? And Brahma thought about it, and he had a system failure. It is couldn't work it out. He's supposed to be self-realized. There are various lessons to be drawn from this. The one which Jiva Goswami has highlighted here is that even though Brahma was assured by Krishna that you will not be bewildered, you serve me, you won't be bewildered. And even though Brahma himself told Narad that I'm not bewildered, I'm not going to be bewildered, but he's bewildered. So how is that possible? Well, it's always possible for the jiva, however well he may be situated, unless he's fully in a pact of intense love with Krishna, then there's always the possibility of his falling even from an elevated position of devotional service. And there are many examples of that. The Bharat Maharaj is the commonly cited example. Although he was on the level of Bhava Bhakti, which is almost there, but he fell down due to attachment to a deer. He fell into material consciousness. There's also the example of Romaharshan Sutta. He was so elevated that he was direct disciple of Vyas, trained by Vyas, and he was elevated above all the other sages present at Naimisharanya, but he had the seed of envy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart, to the extent that when the Supreme Personality of Godhead arrived there, that he thought he was more exalted than God himself and failed to stand. Bilva Mangal Thakur is described that in his previous life he was in the stage of Bhava Bhakti, but he had some attachment which manifested in this life, or the life that we know of his, as an attachment to a girlfriend or prostitute. Prabhupada said, talking about this, he said, in your language you call girlfriend, in ours we say prostitute. So to have a sexual partner outside of marriage, that is considered prostitution, the same as. So he was very much attached. We see that, but when he became free from that attachment, then his pure devotional service became manifest. We see in our movement also that sometimes people ask, well, how can greatly exalted devotees fall down? Well, that's possible. The incarnation of book distribution, Srila Prabhupada said, well, he didn't fall down from devotional service, but he's not particularly engaged in that activity anymore. A disciple of Srila Prabhupada. The most important grandson of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is now not acting in a way that would suggest that he's got even much relationship of any kind with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So it is possible that the emperor of Kirtan, and there are so many, who were elevated to an exalted position by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, and started to think themselves intrinsically in that position, that it's not, I'm here because I deserve to be here. And the result, when they forgot that Jogata bichare kichu nahi pai tomara karuna sha, when they forgot that I'm here only by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, then Punar mushiko bhava. Again become a mouse. Do you all know that? What that means? They don't know.
Well,
Some of them don't. Anyway, it's worth telling again. There was a mouse who was harassed by a cat. He was always afraid of the cat. So he approached a yogi, and it was in the good old days when mice could speak. Or maybe the yogi could understand mouse language. So the mouse submitted his complaint to the yogi. So the yogi said, "So what do you want?" And the mouse said, "Well, you could make me a cat." Abracadabra, or whatever yogis say. Tatastu. So, yeah, tatastu means so be it. So be it. And the mouse became a cat. Little time later he came back and said, "Meow." And the yogi also knew how to speak cat language. He's quite a good yogi, it seems. I don't know that. I'm just making speculation here. Anyway, somehow or other the cat spoke and said, "Now I am harassed by a dog. So, can you do something to help me? Make me a dog? Tatastu." And sometime later he came back and said, "Well, now I'm harassed by a tiger. So, can you make me a tiger? Tatastu." Made him into a tiger, and then having got the mentality of a tiger, he started licking his chops and looking at the yogi in a manner that he thought that the yogi might like to become part of the tiger. In other words, instead of the yogi merging into the impersonal Brahman, he was due to be merged into the belly of the tiger. So seeing this, the yogi said, "Punar mushiko bhava," again become a mouse. So it's a charming little story, but it has a grave import for all of those on the progressive path of spiritual realization, or even materially. We see the people, they climb up. There are so many in America, probably especially, because at least previously it was the land of opportunity. People can come up and they earn from rags to riches, Cinderella. But then again, there are people who've rags to riches stories, and again within the same lifetime, riches to rags. So be careful. Always, when we go up, remember that our position is constitutionally down. We are lower than Krishna, always. And lower than everyone. A Vaishnava should think, I'm lower than everyone, which is difficult. Must be difficult when you're in the body of Lord Brahma, because you're sitting above everyone else, and everyone else has come from you, and you have direct link with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, Lord Brahma is very intelligent, not only materially but spiritually also. So he by his good intelligence, he's able to remember that, well, after all, I am not so important. But sometimes he may forget due to karamadhi. He's busily active in this material world, in the act of creation, and you can get carried away by that. He's creating again and again, and it's by his mental power he corrects. He's not out there mixing bricks. But nevertheless, it's an activity of this material world. If it's performed solely for the sake of Krishna, then it becomes Brahmarpanam Brahmahave Brahmagno Brahmana Hutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Everything that's performed for the sake of Krishna, the activity, the performer, actually it's in the sacrifice, the butter that's offered in the fire itself, all becomes spiritualized. The activity, everything becomes spiritualized. So in the same way, as Srila Prabhupada often give the example, the microphone, this is a spiritual microphone. So, really? Well, what's any different to any other microphone? What makes it spiritual? It's spiritual because it's being used in Krishna's service. So it's considered spiritual paraphernalia. Lord Brahma, by the activity of creation, which is powered by Rajoguna, the mode of passion. So the tendency to think of, in the mode of passion, is to think, Ishvaroham aham bhogi siddhoham balavan sukhi. I am the controller. I'm creating this. I'm the controller. Then I'm the enjoyer. I'm the enjoyer of this. I'm perfect. I'm powerful. I'm happy in doing this. So, in this way, Brahma may become bewildered. We may also, in Krishna consciousness movement, we're doing so many things. We're building temples and distributing books, making disciples, and doing this, and we may take pleasure from it in the wrong way, so that our intelligence becomes bewildered, and then we can't understand things properly. What is the proper understanding? Even though it's done for the sake of Krishna, we've seen this many times, that devotees perform activities for the sake of Krishna, but some spirit of enjoying the result of that, even if the result is not, even if one is living very simply and not enjoying in a gross way, one may enjoy the respect that is offered, the status of being a spiritual leader. This is very dangerous. As soon as there's any tinge of enjoying spirit, then our ability to understand reality as it is, all the different aspects of Krishna consciousness and service to Krishna, it becomes tinged with material desire, and then we start to think, well, what I am doing is for the sake of Krishna, therefore anything or any way I do it, it's all for Krishna, and everyone becomes benefited by doing that. So it doesn't matter if I mistreat people or I deal with them in a dishonest manner so that they become disturbed because it's all for Krishna. If they don't understand, well, that's their insincerity. We've heard this kind of thing. We've heard this kind of statement, that we presume that what we are doing is indisputably spiritual and pure. But if we think like that, then there's a very good chance that we're already affected by material considerations. Instead of thinking of our activities as a humble offering to our spiritual master, or in our ISKCON to Srila Prabhupada and all the previous acharyas, and then in this way to Krishna, if we start to think too much in consciousness of my project, of course we should take responsibility for what we're doing. And the opposite of this mentality is to not take any responsibility. Well, it's all Krishna, leave all the lights burning and the building is falling down, but well, Krishna will look after it. You don't need to watch the road when you're driving because Krishna's in control. But Krishna has given us some responsibility also. Krishna's in control of material nature, and He's set it up that if you don't watch the road when you're driving, by the laws of nature, then you'll drive into a lamppost. You call them lampposts here in this country? Yeah. Okay. Or on the other side of the road and into an oncoming car. Of course, this is a bit of an absurd example, but that mentality is often there. Just like sometimes I say to devotees, in India mostly, now in some big cities, wearing seatbelts, you'll get caught by the police if you don't wear them. But most places you can go without wearing a seatbelt. So devotees don't put their seatbelt, tell them put their seatbelt. So one common response is, "Oh, it doesn't matter, the police won't catch us." As if the police here don't bother. Another response is that, "Oh, it's okay, we already chanted the Nrsimha prayers." As if, I'm not wearing my seatbelt, but it's okay because, Nrsimha's got to look after us now because we chanted the Nrsimha prayers. So this kind of attitude is not Krishna conscious, thinking that we can act frivolously and at the same time Krishna is obliged to look after us. So this is all karamadhi, intelligence bewildered by activities of creation. What's the answer? How can we get free if the senses are always attracted to the sense objects? Because the senses, there's no meaning to the senses unless they interact with the sense objects. It's as if they don't exist, which is what the Kumaras are saying, that we want to stop the activities of the senses, but that's not possible because there are sense objects, and the senses automatically interact with the sense objects. So how is it possible? You know the answer.
Are there any rhetorical questions?
No, and maybe we can ask any of these. Anyone else has any idea? It's a tough one for newcomers. Well, let's see.
Well, the best thing for us to do is to engage our senses in objects associated with Krishna, so they remind us.
The senses should, that's the point, That Krishna is the director of the senses. If we think that we have our intrinsic relationship is with matter, and that we are material beings, and that this materially contaminated senses are us, well, as long as we think like that, we're not liberated. And we can never be liberated because we're trying in the wrong way. But liberation comes automatically when we stop seeing this world as the field of our enjoyment. Last night we were talking about the field. And when we see that everything is Krishna's and meant to be engaged in the service of Krishna. So it was the wrong question. The Kumaras are very intelligent, but they asked the wrong question. And Brahma, the question itself was absurd, actually. It sounds like a very good question, doesn't it? But from the point of view of those who know the answer, or the actual answer, it's an absurd question. It's a meaningless question. Devahuti asked a similar question, we'll find in the 3rd canto. And it seems like a very good question. But Prabhupada says in the purport that this question is more or less is instigated by the philosophy of voidism. Because the idea that, well, there's either material interaction and there can't be anything else, so then there is then liberation means nothingness. So Hamsa Avatar, his answer, actually this Sohotra Swami, in his Bhagavat Science of the Mind seminar, analyzed this in some. If you want to get an in-depth analysis of this, you can. He in his seminar, I can give you those recordings if you like. He went and he analyzed this section of the, particularly this question and the Hamsa Avatar's reply. He analyzed it in some detail. So Hamsa Avatar, his reply is that, what about me? You're asking about matter and liberation, but you don't realize that your relationship is with me. Your relationship is not with matter. That is the problem. That the question is motivated, or what's the word? It springs from a wrong perception of reality, by which one can never be liberated. And Brahma fell in the same trap also, of trying. It's the old trap of trying to work everything out with your own intelligence. Brahma was very intelligent. No one's ever going to be as intelligent as Brahma. Einstein's just completely nothing compared to Lord Brahma. But the same problem that Brahma, he famously had, his famous realization after he tried to outwit Krishna. You know that verse? Jananta eva janantu kimbahu janame prabhu manaso vapaso vacha vaibhavam tava gocharaha. After Brahma had tried to outwit Krishna, thinking, who is this? Who is this Krishna? What's going on here? I thought he was supposed to be God. My father is Narayana, and he's definitely God. He's huge, and the universes emanate from his body, and he's worshipped by all the demigods. Young Brahma, myself, Varunendra, Rudra, Maruta, Stunvanti, Divyaistava, all the demigods worship him. And this Krishna, now I thought he was supposed to be the avatar of Vishnu, but just look at him, he's just wandering around barefoot, running after, with a stick in his hand, running after some cows, not even associating with the Brahmanas, and, it's just, he eats with his left hand, and how can he be God? So Brahma had some doubt. So Brahma, by his mystic potency, tremendous mystic potency, he thought, Brahma, he stole Krishna's calves and the cowherd boys. And Krishna reproduced them. And Brahma couldn't work out what was going on. I kidnapped them, they're still here, what's going on? And then Krishna showed that these cowherd boys and calves, actually this, by him doing this, Brahma he helped the residents of Vrindavan, the cows and the elderly gopis, especially on the age of Yashoda, Mai, and the gopas on the age of Nanda Maharaj, they all wanted Krishna, as the cows wanted to feed Krishna with their milk, with their own personal milk. And they all loved Krishna. And the elderly gopis and gopas, although they weren't at all envious of Yashoda and Nanda, but they also thought, I'd like to have Krishna as my own son. So Krishna became their son by the mercy of Lord Brahma, and became the calves of the cows who wanted to feed him their own milk. But from his own perspective, Brahma thought, oh no, when he realized. Then Krishna showed to Brahma, when Brahma was having another circuit breakdown, all his big brains, they all didn't stop working. He couldn't work out what was going on. And then Krishna showed that each one of the expansions of these cowherd boys, what's happened is I have become the facsimile of each cowherd boy and calf. It's me, and every one of them is being worshipped by millions of Brahmas and Shivas and Indras and Apsaras and Gandharvas and Charanas. And so Brahma, at that point, he said, others may say that this verse I just quoted, Jananta eva janantu. Some people may say, I understand Krishna. They can say that. Let them say it. But as far as I am concerned, Mahadeva Swayambhu, the great God, born from Vishnu, as far as I am concerned, with any effort to describe Krishna with my mind, with my body, I can't measure Krishna. It's beyond my ability to do so. So that may be a problem with intelligence, that we're always trying to work everything out with our intelligence, and not recognize that we're simple servants of Krishna. We're simply meant to serve Krishna. It's not that intelligent inquiry is not to be done. One should inquire intelligently, but if one has this simple faith that I am Krishna's, I am meant to serve Krishna. Krishna is unlimited. Krishna can do whatever he likes. If one has that simple faith, then that is perfection. as is demonstrated in the story of Narad Muni and the cobbler and the Brahmana. And you all know that story. Is it?
I mean, I know it.
They don't all know it. All right, well, these are very good anecdotes to learn. They might sound like little stories or folk nursery, what do you call them? Bedtime stories for children. Fables, that's right, that's the word. But this is a story told by Prabhupada of Narada Muni, so it's not just something which someone made up, it's not just some quaint little bedtime stories. It's a fact. Narada Muni was going along his way once, he's always travelling around, and he came upon a Brahmana. Brahmana means a very high class, sophisticated, learned, respected member of Vedic society. So the Brahmana saw Narada and asked Narada where he was going. Narada said, I'm on my way to Vaikuntha to take darshan of Lord Vishnu. So the Brahmana said, okay, good, well, when you get there, do one thing for me. Just tell Lord Vishnu I'm coming soon, I'm going to be liberated soon. And or just ask him when I'm going to be liberated. I mean, I'm souping the story up a little bit, but the Brahmana was a puffed up fellow, and he thought that by his learning and his chanting of mantras and his following rules and regulations strictly, that he's certain to be liberated. So Narad said, okay, I'll inquire when you're going to be liberated. A little further along the path, Narad Muni came to a cobbler who was sitting in the shade of a banyan tree. And the cobbler very humbly offered obeisance to Narada and inquired from Narad where he was going. Narad told him, on my way to Vaikuntha, at which the cobbler became struck with awe. You're on your way to Vaikuntha to see the Supreme Lord. And he spontaneously broke into glorification of the Supreme Lord Narayana, who lives in the Vaikuntha world. So the cobbler asked the same question, said that I know I'm very fallen, but please ask Narayana that when there might be any chance for this fallen servant of his to come to his lotus feet and be liberated and go to the spiritual world. So Narad Muni went to Vaikuntha and he praised Lord Vishnu and spent some time with Lord Vishnu in Vaikuntha. And before leaving, he remembered that these two persons had asked him when they would be liberated. So he asked this to Vishnu, Narayana, and Narayana replied that the cobbler will be liberated in this very life. As for the Brahmana, I don't know. I know everything, but I don't know when he's going to be liberated. Not for a long time. Narad was surprised. Cobbler is the lowest, worst class of person, generally considered, because he's dealing in leather. And then he has to put shoes on people's feet, so it's considered outcasts. They're not even the lowest class of people within Vedic society. They're just at the edge, practically they're outside. Antyaja, they're born outside the Vedic society. So they're not pure. They'll take the cows that will die, they become the property of the chandalas, so who can take their meat and eat it, and take the leather and make shoes and drums and whatever leather is used for, and various items. That becomes the property. When the cow dies, then it becomes the Chandala. They have the right to take that. And Brahmanas are considered very pure. Bhudeva, gods on earth, gods of the earth. And they're always engaged in chanting mantras and performing pujas. They're supposed to be in very pure consciousness. So Narada was surprised. How is that possible? That the Brahmana, his liberation is practically impossible, it seems, from what you're saying, whereas the cobbler is going to get liberation in this very life. So Narayan said, well, I won't tell you the answer directly, but you'll get it. When you go back, you tell them that I, Lord Vishnu, is another name for Narayana, in Vaikuntha, you saw me putting an elephant through the eye of a needle. So Narada said, okay, all right, I'll do that. So he went back, he came to the cobbler first. The cobbler prostrated and said to Narada that, oh, you're so fortunate, you went to Vaikuntha, you saw Narayana directly. I'm so fallen, I'll never have that opportunity, even in millions of lifetimes. I'm the most sinful person. Tell me, what was my glorious Lord doing when you saw him in Vaikuntha? Narada said, he was putting the elephant through the eye of a needle. And the cobbler said, oh, how wonderful. My Lord, he can do anything. Anything. It's even the impossible he can do. And Narada said, well, how do you think that was? Do you really believe that he was putting the elephant through the eye of a needle? Of course. Why should he not be able to? Why should I doubt it? You told me. If you say it must be true. And I see I'm sitting under this banyan tree and it has these small seeds, and in every one he's put a big banyan tree, so why can't he put an elephant through the eye of a needle? It's very intelligent. Narada went on, came past the Brahmana. Brahmana didn't. He wasn't so respectful to Narada. He said, but he asked him, so you went to Vaikuntha? Yes, I went to Vaikuntha. And what was the reply when you asked Narayana? Is he getting everything ready for me up there? And Narada said, well, I asked Narayana, and he said that even himself doesn't know. You're not going soon, that's for sure. The Brahmana said, what? I don't believe you haven't been. You didn't see Narayana. You're just bluffing. That's all. You never went to the spiritual world. Tell me, he said in a challenging word. Tell me, what was Lord Vishnu doing? So Narada replied, he was putting an elephant through the eye of a needle. And Brahmana said, stupid. How is that possible? Why are you talking this nonsense? How you think you can bluff me that you went to the spiritual world and saw Narayana? You're talking all this nonsense. Get out of here. So one had faith in the inconceivable potency of Lord Narayana, and because of that, even though he wasn't so learned or apparently pure, he wasn't pure in his activities like the Brahmana. He was so pure that he wouldn't even go anywhere near the Chandala. He was ritually pure, but his mind was impure. Whereas the Chandala, his mind was impure. His activities were ritually impure. Ritually means because he handles dead bodies, then he can't go anywhere near a Vedic sacrifice. So for rituals he was impure. But his consciousness was pure because he had great faith in and love for Lord Vishnu. Another point which isn't mentioned in the purport, Dhyamana Prashna Bijam. Prashna means question. Bijam is translated here as the essential truth. The usual translation of bija is seed. It literally means a seed. It's like you put a seed of banyan tree. It can also mean the seed of an idea. It can also mean the seed of the potency of a mantra in the form of a syllable. It's also called. So these are various meanings of the word seed. So I'm just suggesting here that this prashna, this question, can also be considered the seed of the mentality by which one is never liberated. They're asking about liberation, but the very question is itself, the very attitude or the understanding inherent in the question is such that one can never attain liberation by even thinking in this way. It's a completely wrong way of thinking, because it doesn't recognize that the giver of liberation is Vishnu, and that liberation is not, it's not as the impersonalist thing, simply to disentangle oneself from material activities, but the actual liberation is to change one's consciousness from being an enjoyer of the world to that of being enjoyed by Krishna, to being a servant of Krishna. So we find in the Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna discusses this. He talks about withdrawing the mind from the sense objects, and Arjuna says, well, that's pretty much impossible. And then Krishna says, well, just always think of me, and that's the topmost yoga anyway. So it's like Krishna goes to describing the process of liberation as conceived by the impersonalists. And Arjuna rejects it, and Krishna also rejects it, having described it. Although there are some valuable instructions therein for devotees also, because our basic process is to fix our mind on Krishna, but to do that, it also there is some, not exactly, the mechanical process of yoga is to attempt to withdraw the mind from the sense objects, which is this question asked here by the sages, the four Kumaras. So that process is accepted as a subordinate process to that of fixing the mind on Krishna. Subordinate, it cannot be the whole process, but at the same time, just like that verse is written outside, yato yato nischalati manas chanchalam astiram tatastato nayam yaitat atmanyeva vishangayat. Whenever the mind wanders away, bring it back. So devotees can do that also. When we find the mind is wandering here and there, not fixed on Krishna or Krishna conscious topics, immediately bring it back. So this may be adopted as a subsidiary process, but not as the whole process. So, Hare Krishna. Any question about this, please? Or comment? Yes? Yeah, Mahatma will take his question.
The life of conditioning means, just like in the verse it's described at the end of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that lust has taken over everything.
Lust is all-pervading. Lust is all in all. The senses, mind and intelligence are the sitting place. Yeah.
I mean, basically the living entity has no other instruments for perceiving reality.
Yes, I'll just repeat this so I can go in here. So lust has taken over, so the living being has no other instruments to perceive reality or even conceive of anything else.
So even when such a person starts to practice Krishna consciousness, it doesn't seem that person has any other choice besides being guided by someone who's freed from the bondage of...
So to get free, he needs to be guided by someone who's already freed. Yeah, so Arjuna could only get free. Yeah, is there more to say?
I'd like to add just one more thing.
Yeah.
That you referred to Bharat
Bharat became a deer.
becoming a deer, and he was on the platform of Bhava. So it doesn't seems that these kutas and bijas, they continue existing even.
Kuta and bija, again the word bija here, the bija, the seed of sin. And kuta means the stockpile. There's the whole stockpile of sin, and bija is the seed of sin. So this is a huge amount. And
they seem to exist even on the platform of Bhava.
It exists still on the platform of Bhava.
Right. It's not like destroyed as it's stated in Bhakti Samhita Sindhu on the platform of sadhana, because we find them on the platform of Bhava too. There's still some impurity.
They're not destroyed on the platform of sadhana, because we find even in the case of Bharat Maharaj, even on the platform of Bhava, there's the possibility of fall down.
And, so, I mean, what kind of devotee should we be guided by in order not to get lost?
What kind of devotee should we be guided by in order not to be lost? This is a profound and important question. We should be guided by a devotee who can lead us on the path to Krishna, who can connect us with Krishna. Who can do that? Well, we say, well, Prabhupada can do that. How can Prabhupada do that? He's only a jiva. After all, Prabhupada is a jiva, right? We don't say he's God himself. How can he do that? When the jiva is so infinitesimal, how can he link us with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is infinite? So it all works by Krishna's mercy. Ultimately, it's all by Krishna's mercy that He empowers a devotee to carry Krishna Shakti, which is just who can carry the weight of the Ganga? Lord Shiva can carry that. Who can carry Krishna Shakti? It has to be a very, very great devotee. Krishna Shakti bina nahi Tara Pravartan. Without Krishna Shakti, no one can preach Krishna consciousness. There's also that, there's so many. Krishna She Toma, Krishna Dite Para, Tomara Shakati Ache. Krishna, the pure devotee has the power to give us Krishna because Krishna is his. The jiva, Krishna becomes the property of the jiva. Krishna himself says, Aham Bhakta Paradhina, Nahi Swatantra Iva Dvija. I'm not independent, I'm under the control of my devotees. So, Bhakti, who is which, even though Bhakti is so great, that can Bhakti manifests where? Not in Bhagavan, in the devotee. So Bhakti is greater than God. And that can manifest even in a jiva. Bhakti. Bhakta Bhakti Rasa Patra. So this is inconceivable, how the Supreme becomes subordinate to the infinite, becomes subordinate to the infinitesimal. By the power he invests in bhakti, his desire for love is such. He's subordinate to desire. So, and his mercy can manifest in any devotee if he so desires that. It also depends on the sincerity of the person to connect with that mercy. That mercy is, the mercy of Krishna is not limited by time or space. And we can connect with that mercy. Even if we don't have association of devotees. Of course, that's always said to be essential. But ultimately what is essential is our sincere desire to connect with Krishna, because if we don't have that, then even if we're in the association of a great devotee, we won't even recognize that he's a great devotee. We won't have any... So many people saw Prabhupada and they just walked past him on the street in New York, or just walked past him and didn't care about him. So, what should we do? We should pray for Krishna's mercy. Krishna will manifest that to us, as much as we're sincere to take it. Should we get a Bhagavat Guru on the level of Prabhupada? Well, Mahabhagavat devotees on the level of Prabhupada, they don't pop up on every street corner. As disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, I quoted that at the beginning of the Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav book, the devotees of the category of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, hardly 2 or 3 may appear in a day of Brahma. Does that mean that Krishna's mercy is only available during their manifest presence? No. Their mercy is still available. Those who can connect us with their mercy and their potency, then by doing that we can get the mercy of Krishna. That is my brief reply to that question. Otherwise we find devotees are always running around looking for the Maha Bhagavat Super Paramahamsa 10,008, and and they are. What happens? They run to one, and then they think, well, maybe he's not as maybe there's 100,008 somewhere else, or this one, he's not the real thing. And they run around from one to another, and or even if someone is 10,000,008, whatever it is, but what we need to hear is we are not the body, we're eternal servants of Krishna. This is what Prabhupada told us. Sometimes they think Prabhupada's on a lower level because he taught us that we're not the body. But it's because we're on a lower level, and that's his mercy, that he gave us Prabhupada's mercy is that he gave us what we needed instead of giving us what we think we might have needed. Yeah.
We also see, offering my opinion here, observation, that many of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, like yourself, did not have hardly any association.
Yeah, many didn't have much personal association.
Yet they have benefited by serving Srila Prabhupada.
You have benefited by serving Srila Prabhupada, and you can do also. All of you can do so also. Time to go. Okay, we're over time. You have one question?
Yeah, I was in the end, in conclusion, you say that is not only the way to bring your mind from running around, and what is
to bring the mind under control. Yeah.
What is the other way then?
Put it another way, always think of Krishna. That's the real thing.